The city hummed far below the glass walls of Ethan Vale's penthouse, but inside his bedroom there was no sound, only the faint beeping of machines and the shallow rhythm of a man who no longer wanted to breathe. He used to control empires with a single signature. Now he couldn't even lift a glass of water without trembling. The world called him a genius investor. The headlines once called him unstoppable. But here, surrounded by marble floors and mirrored ceilings, Ethan Vale looked like a shadow, one that even the light had given up on. Mrs. Ramos, his aging housekeeper, moved quietly around him, careful not to disturb the silence. She had worked for Ethan since his early days, when the apartment was filled with laughter and music, when he believed in things like family and joy. Those days ended the night he returned from the coast alone. Since then, he had lived behind drawn curtains, surviving on medication and regret. No doctor could name what was killing him. His heart was strong. His lungs worked fine. His blood tests came back normal, yet every morning, he woke up weaker, one morning. As rain painted silver trails across the windows, Mrs. Ramos made a decision. She couldn't watch him fade anymore. She contacted someone she had once heard about, an integrative nurse who didn't just treat the body, but the soul. Her name was Amelia Hart. When Amelia arrived, she didn't look like any nurse Ethan had ever met. Her clothes were simple, her face calm but unreadable, her eyes the color of morning light after a storm. She stood in his doorway, holding a small medical bag and a quiet confidence that unsettled the still air. Ethan barely glanced at her. "Another experiment?" he muttered. "I've had enough of those." Mrs. Ramos spoke softly. "She's not like the others, sir. Just give her a chance." Amelia didn't ask permission. She walked to the heavy velvet curtains and pulled them open. The sudden rush of sunlight poured across the room, revealing dust in the air, and a man who had tried too hard to disappear. Ethan flinched. "Close them," he snapped. The light won't hurt you," Amelia interrupted, her tone even but firm. "You've been living in darkness too long. If you want to live, Mr. Vale, you'll have to stop hiding from life." For a moment, the only sound was the city outside, the faint horns, the echo of life continuing without him. Then Ethan turned his head, slowly, his voice sharp with anger. "Who gave you the right to talk to me like that?" "The same person who gave me the right to be here," she said, meeting his glare without blinking. "Mrs. Ramos, and maybe fate." Something in the way she said it made him pause. Fate. He didn't believe in that word anymore. But there was something in her presence, steady, unafraid, that felt different from the parade of specialists before her. As she began her examination, her hands were gentle but deliberate. She checked his pulse, his temperature, the rhythm of his breathing. But her eyes noticed more than numbers. His muscles twitched when she brushed near his ribs. The scars there caught her attention, thin, pale lines crossing his side like whispers of a story untold. She frowned and quietly scanned his file. Nothing in the records mentioned surgery. "When did you have this procedure?" she asked softly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's none of your concern." "It is, if I'm responsible for your care," she replied. His gaze turned to ice. "I said, drop it." Her silence stretched, but she didn't look away. He was used to people obeying, retreating from his walls. This woman didn't. Instead, she scribbled a note on her clipboard, her expression unreadable, as if she'd just seen the first piece of a much larger mystery. As she packed up her tools, she said gently, "I'll be back tomorrow. Open the windows for a few hours. You need air." He didn't answer. She turned to leave. But just before she reached the door, his voice, low and rough, followed her. "You think sunlight can cure everything, Miss Hart?" She paused, her hand on the doorknob, and without turning said, "Not everything, but it's a good place to start." When the door clicked shut, Ethan stared at the streak of sunlight cutting across his bed. For the first time in months, He didn't close his eyes. And deep beneath his anger, something unfamiliar stirred. Curiosity. Or maybe the first faint heartbeat of hope. The next morning, the penthouse felt different. The silence had changed, shape as if it were waiting for something. When Amelia Hart returned, she carried not only her medical bag, but also a small plant. She placed it by the window without asking permission. Ethan watched her from the bed, expression guarded. "What is that supposed to do?" he asked, his voice dry and distant. "It's a peace lily," she said softly. "It filters the air and reminds people to breathe." He scoffed, then coughed as if the air itself had turned against him. She moved closer, checking his pulse again, her hand steady, her eyes studying more than his vitals. She noticed how his heart rate jumped every time she was near him, not from attraction, but from something darker, an instinct that came from fear or guilt. She couldn't tell yet last night. She had stayed awake thinking about those scars. They weren't surgical. Not in the traditional sense. They were too clean, too deliberate, too secret. And now seeing him under the daylight, she realized how pale he was, how the world outside had stopped, touching him completely. He lived in this tower surrounded by luxury but starved of life. "Mr. Vale," she said quietly, "when was the last time you went outside?" He looked away. "Months, maybe a year. I don't remember, you should try." She said the city could help you remember who you were before all this. Before. What before you stopped living? The words hung in the air between them. She expected anger again, but instead, there was silence, heavy and uncertain. He looked at her as if searching for something. He'd lost in himself as the day passed. She prepared his meals, adjusted his medication, and read through his files. She was methodical, but there was a gentleness in her every move when she wasn't watching him. He found himself watching her. Her movements were calm, deliberate, like a storm pretending to be a breeze when night came. A thunderstorm rolled across the skyline. The glass walls trembled with each strike of lightning. Ethan's breathing grew shallow. His hand trembled over the sheet, and then she heard it, a faint whisper. "No, please don't." His voice was raw, filled with terror. She rushed to him. His eyes were open but unfocused, trapped in some memory that was eating him alive. "Breathe, Ethan," she said calmly, taking his hand. He flinched, but her grip didn't waver. "Look at me. You're safe here." He gasped for air, sweat beading on his forehead. Her voice stayed steady, guiding him through slow breaths in and out, until the trembling eased his chest, rose and fell with her rhythm when he finally looked at her. His eyes were wet with confusion and shame. "How did you do that?" he whispered. "You just needed someone to remind you how." She said, her tone softer now. He turned away, embarrassed. "I don't need anyone," she smiled faintly. Maybe not anyone, but maybe someone. He didn't reply when she stepped away to adjust the lights. She noticed something else, a faint reflection in the mirror behind his bed, a framed photograph she hadn't seen before. It was tucked between books and dust, almost hidden in the shadows. She moved closer and froze. The woman in the picture looked almost exactly like her. Same hair, same eyes, same quiet smile. Her heart pounded. She felt the air grow heavy. Ethan realized where she was looking, and his face hardened. "That's Claire," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "My fiancée. She's gone." The silence that followed was deafening. The thunder outside crashed again, echoing through the glass walls. Amelia didn't speak, her mind spinning with questions. She hadn't come here to be compared to ghosts. But as she turned to leave, she saw his eyes. One part pain, one part fear, and something else beneath it. Something that felt like recognition. When the storm finally faded, the city lights returned to the windows. and Ethan lay staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The image of Amelia's face lingered against the memory of Claire's, and for the first time, he didn't know if the world had sent him a nurse or a haunting. The next morning, the penthouse was filled with sunlight, but it felt colder than ever. Ethan sat by the window for the first time in months, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city come alive below him. Amelia brewed herbal tea across the room. The soft scent of mint and lemon drifted through the air. He looked at her and said quietly, "You shouldn't have come back." She turned her head slightly, her voice calm. "I made a promise to Mrs. Ramos to heal you." He gave a bitter smile. "I'm not sick, Miss Hart. I'm cursed." She carried the tea to him, setting the cup gently on the table. "Cursed or not, you still need to eat." He reached for the cup, his hand shaking just enough for her to notice when she placed her hand over his to steady him. Froze. His pulse jumped again, and this time she felt it too. The energy between them was charged fragile like glass, ready to shatter with one wrong word as they talked. She asked about Claire, his late fiancée. He hesitated, then began speaking like someone confessing to the night itself. Claire was everything. Light laughter, chaos, I didn't deserve her, he said, his voice low. She loved the ocean. She died there during a storm. I couldn't save her. Amelia listened quietly, letting his silence fill the spaces. His eyes glistened, but no tears came, the kind of grief that had turned to stone long ago. Later that day, she sat by his bedside, noting his blood pressure when she asked about medication. Refills, he said the pharmacy had already delivered them, but something in his tone made her check the cabinet anyway. She froze. Inside was a bottle of painkillers with a prescription date that didn't match any record from the hospital. Her stomach tightened. She turned to him. "These weren't prescribed." "Buy me, Ethan." "What are they?" His eyes flickered with something like guilt or maybe fear. "I need them to sleep," he said. "You mean to forget?" She corrected. He turned away. The reflection of his face in the window looked like a stranger to himself. She took the bottle, quietly locking it in her case, and for a long time, neither spoke. The silence was a conversation of its own. That night she couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against the glass like whispers pulling her out of bed. She walked to the study, the air heavy with secrets. She saw a drawer slightly open, the same one that held the photo of Claire. Her fingers hesitated before sliding it open. Inside were envelopes sealed with wax and hospital reports dated 2 years earlier. Her eyes widened. The patient name wasn't Ethan Vale. It was Claire Reed, the same woman in the photograph. Her heart pounded as she read fragments, words like organ trauma, internal bleeding, and experimental treatment. Someone had changed the names on these files. She didn't understand, but she knew enough to know this wasn't an accident. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "What are you doing?" She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, pale from exhaustion, but his eyes sharper than she'd ever seen. She stammered, "I found these." "Why were Claire's files in your drawer?" His expression hardened. "She wasn't supposed to die." He whispered, then louder. "She wasn't supposed to die." He took a step closer, his voice trembling. "I thought I could save her, but I failed." The doctors covered it up. They said it was an accident. But it wasn't. It was a deal gone wrong. I paid to protect her reputation. I paid to protect Min. Amelia's voice shook Ethan. "Who did this?" His gaze locked on hers, almost haunted. "Someone I trusted." He said the man who stood beside me the night she fell into the sea. She felt a chill run down her spine. "Who was it?" He whispered his name like a curse. Lucas Kane. My partner in that moment. Amelia realized this wasn't only about sickness. It was about guilt and danger. There was more to this than a lost love. There was a secret buried deep under money and lies. She felt the weight of it pressing between them as lightning flashed across the sky. illuminating Ethan's face. It was pale, drenched in fear. But beneath the fear was something else, something darker and alive. The truth had just begun to surface, and she knew it would change everything. The rain had stopped, but the city still carried its echo. The windows of the penthouse glowed faintly against the night sky. Amelia stood by the fireplace, drying her hands after cleaning the remnants of Ethan's tea. His breathing was steadier now, but his eyes were distant, like he was somewhere far away. She could tell. He was fighting something unseen inside himself, something he refused to name. When she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Amelia, do you believe that people deserve a second chance?" She hesitated. "Yes, if they truly want one." Ethan's gaze lingered on her face longer than before. "What if they don't think they deserve it?" Then she said quietly, "That's when someone else has to remind them that they do." A strange silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of fire. He looked fragile, yet dangerous, like a storm contained inside a man. His voice softened. "I keep seeing her. Claire standing by the water, calling my name every night, the same dream every morning, the same emptiness." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "That's not a dream, Ethan. That's your guilt trying to breathe through you." He looked up, his expression torn between anger and despair. "Don't tell me about guilt. You know, nothing about what I've done." His voice cracked. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached out and touched his wrist. It was a simple gesture, but it made him freeze. Her touch wasn't pity. It was grounding real human warmth in a life filled with cold machinery. He met her eyes, and something inside him broke open without warning. He pulled her closer, the movement desperate, like a man trying to feel alive after years of silence. His lips found hers. The kiss was sudden, raw, filled with years of unspoken pain. For a moment, she didn't move. Her heart racing, not out of romance, but out of the ache of two broken souls colliding. When she finally pulled away, her breath trembled. "Ethan, we can't do this. I'm here to heal you, not to replace someone you lost." He turned away, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry, it won't happen again." His voice was hollow, but his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't sorry. He was terrified of feeling again the following morning. The tension hung like fog. Neither spoke of what had happened, but the energy had shifted during his session. She noticed his pulse irregular, his temperature rising, signs of emotional overload. She decided to confront him gently. "Your body reacts to your emotions. Ethan, it's protecting you from something." He smirked. "Protecting me or punishing me?" She leaned closer. "I think your illness isn't what you think it is. Your body remembers the night she died, maybe even more than your mind does." He froze, then looked at her sharply. How could you possibly know that? She looked at him with quiet certainty. "Because your scars aren't just physical, Ethan. They're memories your body never let go of." He didn't answer, but later when she left the room, she heard him whisper to himself, like a confession to the walls, she wasn't supposed to be on that boat. That night, Amelia found herself unable to sleep again. She walked toward the study, wanting to understand what she had gotten into. As she reached the doorway, she stopped. His desk lamp was still on, papers scattered across the floor. Letters, bank statements, old photographs, and in the middle a single newspaper clipping titled, "Tragedy at Sea. Heiress Claire Reed presumed dead." Beneath it, another article caught her eye. "Business tycoon Lucas Kane under investigation for financial fraud." The date matched the night Claire's body was found. Her blood ran cold before she could process what it meant. She felt a presence behind her, Ethan's voice low and sharp. "You shouldn't have come here again." She turned slowly. His expression was unreadable, shadows cutting across his face. "What are you hiding, Ethan?" she asked softly. He stepped closer, too close, his voice breaking. "Because if I tell you the truth, you'll leave like everyone else." His eyes glistened, and for the first time she saw real fear. Not of pain, but of being abandoned, of facing what he'd buried deep inside his soul. She didn't move away. She looked at him and said, "Then tell me the truth, so I can decide for myself." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally whispered the words that would change everything. Claire didn't drown, she was pushed. The next morning, the air in the penthouse felt heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. Amelia woke early, her mind still spinning from Ethan's confession. She didn't know if it was shock, fear, or pity that kept her awake. But something about the way he said Claire was pushed stayed inside her like a whisper she couldn't silence. She found him sitting by the window again, still in the same clothes from the night before. His face pale, his eyes unfocused. He didn't look sick anymore. He looked haunted. She spoke softly. "Ethan, you need to tell me everything." His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. He didn't look at her. "If I do, you'll think I'm a monster." She shook her head quietly. "I already think you're human." He looked up at her, and for the first time she saw the man beneath the walls. The guilt, the pain, the exhaustion. He exhaled slowly. It wasn't an accident. He said Claire found something she wasn't supposed to. "We were building an investment empire. Lucas was my best friend. We had secrets, dark ones, and she wanted to expose us. I begged her to stop. We argued. She left for the coast the next morning. They said her boat hit the rocks. But I knew someone made sure it did." Amelia's heart pounded. She whispered, "Lucas Kane." He nodded, his voice hollow. "Yes. Lucas sent people to scare her. But something went wrong after that night. I couldn't breathe, couldn't sleep. It's like my body began dying with her. I tried to tell the police, but Lucas owns them. He owns everything." She sat down next to him for a moment. Neither spoke, only the sound of rain tapping against the glass. She could feel the weight of his confession pressing into her chest. She didn't know if she should believe him or fear him, but deep down she sensed his sickness wasn't from guilt alone. It was from the truth buried alive inside him. Later that day, she decided to run a new set of tests. Something was off in his blood work. The markers didn't match the medication he was taking. She sent a sample to an independent lab, and when the report came back that evening, her hands shook. Ethan had been poisoned slowly over months. Microdoses of a heavy metal toxin disguised in his vitamins. She went straight to him, storming, "Into the room, you've been poisoned." Ethan looked at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" She held up the report. "Someone's been adding mercury to your supplements over time. It breaks down. Your system makes it look like your body is failing." His eyes widened with realization. "Lucas?" he whispered. She nodded, her heart racing. "Do you still have contact with him?" Ethan hesitated. "He came here once a month ago, said he wanted to help me invest in a recovery fund. But I told him to stay away. He promised he'd look after me until I could get better." Her voice trembled. "Ethan, he's not helping you. He's killing you." He stood too fast, his strength barely holding. "I trusted him," he said through clenched teeth. "I trusted him with everything." The phone rang suddenly, the sound cutting through the tension. Amelia answered cautiously. It was a distorted voice, a man's voice. "Tell Ethan to keep his mouth shut, or we'll finish what we started." She froze, her blood turning cold. The line went dead, then saw her face pale and asked, "What did they say?" She swallowed hard. "They know we're close, Ethan. They're watching you." He turned toward the window, his reflection trembling in the glass. His voice low, almost broken. "They can take everything from me, but they can't take you." She looked at him, not knowing what to say. He wasn't just her patient anymore. He was a man trapped in a web of betrayal, and she had become the only thread left holding him to life. As night fell, Amelia locked the doors and double-checked the security system. but deep inside she knew walls couldn't protect them from what was coming. Lucas Kane was powerful, dangerous, and now he knew Ethan was ready to tell the truth while Ethan slept. She sat beside his bed, her mind racing through possibilities. She had crossed a line she wasn't supposed to, but it was too late. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when she finally understood his illness wasn't just a sickness. It was a warning of what guilt and greed could destroy. She didn't know it yet, but by morning she would become the target. Tooth night passed without sleep. Thunder rolled over the city again, as if the sky itself was warning them. Amelia sat in the dark living room, her eyes fixed on the security cameras. One of them flickered for a moment, then went black. She felt a chill crawl down her spine. Something was wrong. She rushed to Ethan's room. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, his hand clutching the compass Claire had given him before she died. His voice was low. "They're here, aren't they?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The fear in her eyes was enough. A sudden crash echoed from downstairs. She grabbed her phone, but the signal was gone. Ethan pushed himself up, despite the weakness in his legs. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steadier than she'd ever heard. She followed him as they moved down the hallway, the lights flickering, the air heavy with silence, like the building itself was, holding its breath. When they reached the study, the door was open, drawers torn apart, documents scattered. Someone had been there recently. Evan's jaw tightened. He whispered, "They're looking for the files, the evidence against Lucas." Amelia's pulse raced. "Where are they?" she asked. He glanced toward the wall behind his desk. "There's a safe hidden behind the painting." She moved quickly, removing the frame and entering the code. Inside were folders, a flash drive, and a small velvet box. She handed them to him. "What's on this drive?" He hesitated. "Everything. The proof that Lucas paid to cover Claire's death," before she could respond. The elevator dinged, footsteps followed, heavy, deliberate. She froze. Ethan grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the private stairwell. But the power went out, plunging the penthouse into darkness. She could hear voices below. Searching room by room, Ethan whispered, "Go down the service stairs. Take the drive with you. I'll distract them." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving you again." He looked at her, desperate, his voice breaking. "Please, Amelia, if they catch us both, it's over." She didn't move. The sound of footsteps grew closer. They were out of time. Ethan kissed her forehead, a quiet goodbye, then pushed her toward the door. "Go." Now she hesitated one last moment, then ran through the narrow corridor. Her heart beat loud in her ears. She reached the maintenance exit and stepped into the storm. Outside, the rain poured in sheets, drenching her. As she clutched the flash drive close, inside, Ethan faced the men who had broken into his home. Two of them masked, one unmasked Lucas Kane, himself standing in the doorway. His expression calm, almost amused Ethan. "What have you done?" Lucas said, as if scolding a child. Ethan's voice was steady. "I stopped being afraid." Lucas stepped closer. "That was your first mistake. Fear keeps people alive." Ethan smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Lucas nodded to one of the men, who struck Ethan across the face, sending him to the floor. Ethan's hand reached for the compass, its needle spinning wildly. Lucas crouched beside him, whispering, "You should have burned those files. You should have let the past drown with her." Ethan spat blood and whispered, "Claire tried to save you, Lucas. But you killed her outside. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Amelia had reached the main street, waving down a passing police car. But when the officer stepped out, his uniform looked wrong. His badge, unfamiliar. Realization hit her too late. This wasn't rescue. It was part of the same network Lucas owned. She turned to run, disappearing into the rain, clutching the flash drive like a heartbeat. Back inside, Lucas leaned over Ethan, ready to finish what he'd started. But a Flash of light filled the room. A loud bang followed the building's alarm screaming through the halls. The hidden backup generator had triggered the security lockdown sealing the exits. Lucas cursed his men, shouting orders as Ethan laughed weakly. Through the pain, you built this system to keep others out. Now it's trapping you. 2. The men scrambled, trying to escape as red lights flashed and alarms echoed through the corridors. By the time the police finally arrived, the intruders were gone. Lucas included leaving Ethan bleeding. But alive, he was taken to the hospital unconscious. The flash drive still missing. Miles away, Amelia hid inside an abandoned subway station, trembling but unbroken. She plugged the drive into her laptop and watched the truth unfold on screen. Bank transfers, forged signatures, surveillance footage of Claire's final hours. She whispered to herself. Ethan was right, and for the first time she realized this wasn't just his fight anymore. It was hers too. The rain had stopped, but the city still smelled like smoke and betrayal. Amelia hadn't slept in 2 days. Her clothes were soaked, her body shaking from exhaustion, but she couldn't stop. Not yet. She watched the video footage on the flash drive. Again and again, each time her heart broke a little more. Claire Reed arguing with Lucas Kane the night before she died. Claire shouting about stolen money and manipulation. Lucas's voice, calm, cold, calculating, and then a loud crash. The video ended. There the timestamp matched the night of the accident. Ethan had been telling the truth all along. She knew she had to get the evidence to the police. But she also knew the system was already poisoned. Lucas owned people in every department he could. Erase her the same way he erased Claire. She hid the drive inside her coat and made her way toward an old hospital where she used to work. It was nearly empty now. A skeleton staff left over from years of budget cuts. She needed a secure place to copy the files before she could disappear. Meanwhile, Ethan lay in a hospital bed surrounded by sterile white light. His body bruised, his mind fogged with sedatives. He woke suddenly disoriented. The first thing he saw was Mrs. Ramos sitting by his side, tears streaking her face. She whispered, "Ethan, you're safe now." But her eyes betrayed the truth. There were guards outside his door. Not to protect him, but to keep him in. He reached for her hand and asked, "Where is she?" Mrs. Ramos's lips trembled. "She's gone. They said she disappeared." He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his ribs. He grabbed her wrist weakly. "Tell me she's alive. Please tell me she's alive." Mrs. Ramos nodded faintly. "The nurse who saved you. She's stronger than you." Think as night fell. Ethan pretended to sleep when the guards rotated. He pulled the IV from his arm, ignoring the sting. He slipped out through the maintenance corridor using the stolen keycard he'd hidden weeks earlier outside the hospital. The air felt different, heavy but free. He moved slowly, still weak, but his purpose burning brighter than pain. He needed to find Amelia, across town. Amelia had finished transferring the files to multiple encrypted locations, but the sound of footsteps in the corridor froze her. She turned off the monitor and backed into the shadows. The door creaked open. 2 men in black suits stepped inside, checking the room. One of them spoke into his radio. "She's here somewhere." She didn't wait. She bolted through the back exit, racing down the stairwell, her shoes slapping the concrete. She reached the alley, heart pounding, but a black car screeched to a halt, blocking her path. A figure stepped out. Lucas Kane, his face calm, his voice soft, almost kind. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, Miss Hart. Hand me the drive and walk away alive." She clutched her coat tighter. "You killed Claire. You tried to kill Ethan, and now you think you can scare me." Lucas smiled faintly. "You think I killed Claire? I didn't. I only made sure her death looked clean." The words twisted inside her mind. "What do you mean?" she demanded. He took a step closer. "Claire didn't drown. She survived long enough to sign a statement that destroyed my deal. She was bleeding on the rocks, and Ethan made the call to leave her there." Amelia shook her head. "That's a lie." Lucas smirked. Ask him yourself, before she could respond. Headlights appeared behind her. A car door opened. Ethan stepped out, his face pale but his eyes alive. Lucas looked, almost pleased. Ethan, you never could stay dead long enough. Ethan's voice was low, filled with quiet rage. This ends tonight, Lucas. The tension between them felt electric. Amelia's heart raced as Lucas reached for his gun. Ethan lunged at him. The two men crashed against the wet pavement. The gun slid across the alley. Lucas swung hard, but Ethan countered, landing a blow fueled by every sleepless night, every regret. The rain began again. Washing blood and dirt into the street, Amelia grabbed the gun and aimed, her hands shaking. Drop it, Lucas, or I swear I'll end this right here. Lucas froze, looking from her to Ethan. His smile faded. You won't shoot. You're a nurse, not a killer. Her voice broke but stayed steady. I heal people who want to live. You destroy people who don't deserve to. The sirens wailed in the distance. Lucas backed away slowly as police cars surrounded the alley, red and blue lights painting the night. Ethan reached for Amelia, pulling her close, whispering, You shouldn't have come for me. She looked up at him through tears. I didn't come for you. I came for the truth. As officers dragged Lucas away, he turned his head and said coldly, You think this is over, Ethan, but the people above me will never let you walk free. Ethan watched him go, his chest heaving, his hand still clutching Amelia's. The truth had come out, but he knew the battle was far from over. The storm outside had ended, but the one inside them was just beginning. The next day, the city woke under a pale gray sky, the kind that made even sunlight feel uncertain. Ethan and Amelia were taken to the police station for statements. They sat in separate rooms, both exhausted, both changed. Lucas Kane was in custody, but his final words still echoed in their minds. The people above me will never let you walk free. Ethan knew Lucas was telling the truth. The corruption went higher than anyone could imagine. When Amelia was finally released, she found Ethan waiting outside, leaning against the car, his face pale but his eyes steady. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. They'll come after you now. She crossed her arms. I'm not leaving you like this. We started this together. We finish it together. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. They drove to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a quiet cabin that once belonged to Ethan's parents. The roads were wet, the air heavy with the smell of pine. It was the first time they'd been truly alone since the night everything began inside the cabin. Amelia built a fire while Ethan checked the documents she had saved. The flash drive was gone, but she had sent copies of the evidence to multiple servers. Still, they both knew it wouldn't be enough. Whoever Lucas had been working for would erase it all, if given time. Hours later, when the fire burned low, Ethan sat at the table staring into the flames. He said softly, Claire knew about them too. She wasn't just trying to expose Lucas. She found out about a larger network, people using corporate fronts to launder money from medical research programs. Amelia frowned. What kind of programs? Experimental ones. Illegal ones, Ethan replied, his voice trembling. Claire tried to stop them. She died for it before she could respond. Headlights appeared outside a single car rolling down the hill. Slow, deliberate, Amelia's heart pounded. She grabbed Ethan's hand. Stay behind me, she whispered. They watched as a tall man stepped out wearing a dark coat, his face hidden in shadow. He knocked once on the door, not like a threat, but like someone who already knew what was inside. Ethan opened it slowly. The man introduced himself as Agent Rowe from Internal Investigations, his tone cold but precise. We have reason to believe the network Lucas worked for extends beyond the company into government projects. Ethan narrowed his eyes. So you're saying this isn't over? Rowe nodded. Not even close. He handed Ethan an envelope inside. were photographs of Lucas in meetings with men in military uniforms, and one image that froze Amelia completely. A picture of her standing outside the hospital the day Ethan was admitted. She looked up at Roe, her voice trembling. "Why do you have that?" He stared at her. "Because you were never supposed to be part of this. Miss Hart, your file was flagged the moment you were assigned to him." She felt her stomach drop. "Are you saying they planted me?" He shook his head. "Not exactly, but they were watching you, hoping you'd lead them to him." The fire flickered. The silence grew heavier. Ethan's eyes darkened with realization. "You used her as bait." Roe didn't deny it. "You were untouchable. Mr. Vale, until you got sick, your illness was no coincidence. It was the result of exposure to a prototype, chemical created by the same group. Your company unknowingly funded Amelia's breath caught. The poisoning wasn't random. Ethan, it was part of an experiment." Roe leaned closer now. "You understand why we need the rest of the files? Lucas had backups, somewhere, and if we don't find them, they'll wipe everything and start over." Ethan clenched his fists. "I won't let them do this again." After the agent left the cabin, Amelia sat by the fire, shaking everything she thought she knew was falling apart. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand brushing her hair. "You didn't betray me, Amelia. They betrayed us both." She looked up at him, tears welling, then whispered, "What if they come back for us?" He looked out at the dark woods and said, "Then they'll learn something I never had to teach them before: how far a dying man will go, when he finally has something to live for." As the wind howled outside, Amelia felt both fear and strength rising inside her. The battle wasn't over. It had only changed shape, and somewhere in that storm of truth and danger, she realized her role was no longer just to heal him. It was to fight beside him against the same darkness that had taken everything from them both. The storm returned that night, the wind howling through the trees, as if warning them to leave while they still could. Amelia sat near the window, watching flashes of lightning split the sky. Ethan paced behind her, his body still frail, but his mind sharper than ever. He couldn't sleep, not after what Agent Roe had said. The poisoning. The experiments. The truth that his illness had been man-made. He looked at Amelia and said quietly, "They turned me into a test subject and used you to watch. The results?" Her chest tightened. "Ethan, that's not true. I never knew." He shook his head. "I know you didn't, but they did, and now they'll do it again to someone else. They needed to find the missing backups before the people behind Lucas erased everything." Ethan remembered Lucas's words about a hidden location, somewhere near the coast, the same place where Claire had died. He realized with a chill that the truth had always been there, buried in the ruins of that night by dawn. They were on the road, the old car humming through fog and rain. Ethan drove while Amelia studied the old map he'd found in his files. It led to an abandoned research facility disguised as a shipping warehouse miles from the ocean. Her fingers trembled over the faded ink. "This is where they tested it, isn't it?" He nodded, his eyes fixed ahead. This is where it all began. When they reached the coast, the air smelled of salt and rust. The warehouse loomed over the cliffs, its windows shattered, its walls scorched. By fire, they entered quietly, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The inside looked untouched for years, but the silence felt staged, too clean, too deliberate, as if someone had been waiting. They found a locked steel door near the back. Ethan entered a series of numbers from memory. The door clicked open, revealing a small lab. The walls lined with computer servers still humming weakly, and at the center a glass tank filled with murky liquid, a label marked Project Revenant Amelia's. Heart pounded Ethan. "What is this?" He swallowed hard. "It's what they were building, a serum to rewrite the immune system. It was supposed to save lives until they tested it on people like me." She stepped closer and froze inside. The tank floated a preserved sample, a human heart connected to wires and sensors. Her voice broke. "Ethan, This isn't medicine. It's manipulation. He nodded and opened one of the files on a nearby terminal. The screen flickered to life, showing images of patients. Medical, data and signatures. Hers was there too. Amelia Hart registered caregiver patient status success. Her breath caught in her throat. Ethan turned toward her, his eyes wide. They used you too, he whispered. You were part of the program before you even met. Me. Before she could respond, a gunshot shattered the silence. The bullet hit the metal beside Ethan's shoulder. They ducked behind the desk. A familiar voice echoed through the room. Agent Rowe stepped out of the shadows. His badge gone. His gun steady. He said calmly, I told you it wasn't over. Ethan. They sent me to clean up. Ethan shouted over the thunder. You lied to us. Rowe smirked. No, I told you the truth. You just didn't realize you were both evidence liabilities to be erased. Amelia's pulse raced. She crawled toward the other side of the lab, whispering, Ethan, we have to destroy it. All the servers, the data, everything. Ethan nodded. He grabbed a fuel can from the corner while she ripped out the power cables. Sparks flying through the room. Row fired again, hitting the glass tank. It cracked, sending dark fluid spilling across the floor. Ethan lit a match. The fire spread fast, climbing the walls as alarms blared. Smoke filled the room. Rowe shouted, You're making a mistake. This information could have made you gods. Ethan looked back through the flames and said quietly, I'd rather stay human. They ran toward the exit as the building erupted behind them, the explosion lighting up the cliffside in orange and gold debris raining down. Around them when they reached the car, Amelia collapsed against the door, coughing. Ethan pulled her close, his voice shaking. It's over. She looked up at him through tears. Is it really over? He hesitated, then kissed her forehead. Not yet. But now we know who we're fighting in the distance. The fire devoured the warehouse. The ocean roared beneath them. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt something stronger than fear, a purpose born out of pain. As they drove away, the horizon glowed with the reflection of the flames behind them, and the promise of the truth still waiting ahead. The fire burned through the night, lighting the coast like a second sunrise. The smell of smoke followed them all the way back to the city. Amelia sat in silence, her hands trembling on her lap. Ethan's knuckles white on the steering wheel. Neither spoke. They both knew the explosion would not erase everything. Someone would come looking for what was lost. Someone always did. By morning the news had spread, an anonymous blaze at a government storage site. No survivors reported, but no bodies found. Ethan parked the car in a quiet alley behind his old headquarters. He stared up at the glass tower that once held his name on every floor. His voice was low. This is where it ends, or maybe where it begins. Amelia looked at him, confused. What are you planning? Ethan turned to her and said, We're going to show them what they built. They made their way inside using a service elevator. Ethan knew every code, every hidden passage. His body was weak, but his will unbreakable. They reached the top floor where the executive servers still connected to the network. Amelia hacked into the system using what she had saved before the fire. The files loaded one by one: financial transfers, project data, and secret communications between board members and government officials. It was bigger than either of them had imagined. Billions of dollars hidden behind false research grants and fake patient lists. As the last file uploaded, she froze on one folder marked living subjects. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. The screen filled with photos of hospital beds, faces pale tubes in their arms, all labeled with numbers, not names at the bottom of the list. She found her own file. Amelia Hart terminated status pending. Her breath caught. Ethan looked over her shoulder, his face turning pale. They already marked you, he whispered. She stared at the screen, tears burning her eyes. They were never watching. You, Ethan? They were watching me. The lights flickered. The monitors glitched. A voice came through the speakers, calm and mechanical. "You shouldn't have come back, Mr. Vale." The room filled with static. Then dark-suited men appeared at the far-end guns. Raised, Ethan pulled Amelia behind the desk. Bullets shattered glass around them. Alarms wailed. He reached for the emergency panel, unlocking the rooftop exit. "We go up," he said. She nodded, and they ran through the smoke-filled corridor, bursting into the cold night air on the rooftop. The wind whipped around them. The city stretched below, glittering, indifferent. The men followed, closing in. Ethan stepped forward, holding a small device in his hand, a transmitter connected to the main system. He shouted, "If you shoot me, this goes live to every news outlet in the country." The lead agent sneered. Bluffing, Ethan pressed the button. The giant screen on the opposite building lit up, broadcasting the files, the images, the truth to the entire city. The people below stopped to watch, faces turned upward. Phones recording the evidence that could no longer be buried. The agents froze their mission over Amelia. Clutched Ethan's arm, her voice trembling. "You did it." He smiled faintly, then staggered, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. He had been shot without realizing it. She caught him before he fell, his voice soft against the chaos below. "It's done. They can't hide anymore." She held his face in her hands, tears falling. "Don't you dare leave me." Now Ethan, not after everything, his breathing slowed, but his eyes stayed open just long enough to whisper, "Thank you for bringing me back to life." Sirens filled the air as helicopters circled the building. The agents disappeared into the crowd below. Amelia pressed against Ethan's chest, feeling the faint rhythm beneath her palms. She shouted for help as medics rushed toward them. His hand tightened around hers and then loosened gently. Days later, the world changed. The story broke across every channel. Headlines screamed of corruption and illegal trials. The world finally saw what Ethan Vale had sacrificed to expose the truth. In the final scene, Amelia stood at the edge of the ocean, the same coast where Claire had died, her hair tangled, in the wind in her hand, the compass that once belonged to Ethan. She whispered to the sea, "You saved lives, Ethan. Now let the waves carry you home." She dropped the compass into the surf, watching it disappear beneath the water, and in that moment she felt something more than loss. She felt peace as she turned to leave. A voice behind her stopped her, soft and familiar. "When did I give you permission to throw away my favorite thing?" She spun around. Ethan stood a few feet away, pale but alive, a faint smile on his lips. The doctor said, "I had a choice to stay or to fight. I chose you." She ran to him, laughing and crying at once, and when he held her, the wind carried away the last of the smoke and the ghosts they had both been running from. The world they returned to was still broken, but now it had witnesses, and in each other they found not just survival, but purpose together. They began rebuilding the foundation for something new. Not a company, not an empire, but a truth built on healing and hope, because love like theirs, once born from darkness, had become the light that refused to die.